Hey, everybody, this is Antonio. I'm speaking to you on Thursday, February 27th, 2025. This is just to let you know that this month's episode is going to be a rerun. Ward and I actually had a date scheduled for a couple days ago on Tuesday to record. We were going to do some photographers' books that we both received, and we're going to go over that. But what happened to me was on Wednesday, so basically yesterday, I had to make an appointment with a veterinarian to put my cat Eddie down. And I was thinking about this on Tuesday, and I was not even really present to be able to do a proper episode with Ward. There was just no way I could possibly do justice to the books and the photographers I was going to talk about. I was way too distracted with thinking about the next day, which was yesterday, and putting my cat Eddie down. He's a 19-year-old cat, and he meant a lot to me, but he also meant a lot to my late wife. And it was an incredibly difficult decision, but it was, for those of you who own animals, you can always tell when there's a time that they when they are letting you know that they have to go. And this was his time. He was really just way old. And for some people, animals, and this is not a judgment for anybody, but for some people, some animals are just their pets and stuff like that. But Eddie was part of my family, and he really made a difference. All my cats are actually making a difference in my life since my wife died. And so to lose one of them, even to old age, really just hit me below the belt in some way. And so I had decided to put him down because he was no longer able to walk, and he was really letting me know that he was tired. I mean, poor little guy, he just couldn't walk up to the water bowl, and he almost couldn't eat. And he was skin and bones by the end, and I was, at this point, it was just really hard for me to make the decision to call a vet and have them come over. And I decided to have it done at home because I just didn't really want to make him nervous or just make things worse. It was a little bit more expensive, but I'm really glad I did that here. It just felt more natural. So that's a long way of saying that, I just was not in a place on Tuesday to record a new show with Ward. And so this is not technically a new episode. I'm not going to give it any number. What I am going to do is I'm going to pull up one of our older episodes. In fact, it's one that I actually kind of want to listen to again myself, where when Ward actually came to town in October 2022 and spent a week with me, and we did all sorts of photography things, and we went to some museums and galleries. We went to go see a show at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which was a show with two photographers, Bernd and Hilla Becher, who do all these great sort of typology images of giant industrial structures around the world. And when I was searching for something to play back for you guys tonight, when I was thinking I would play a rerun, that episode actually made me, I really liked it. And because Ward was actually in person, we were sitting in my living room recording it because we had just come back from the show. So it was very fresh in our minds. And it was interesting, now that I'm thinking about it, my late wife passed away in June of 2022. And this was the first time, and this is actually the first time I was meeting Ward in person. We were doing the show for a little while, but he came to visit, and it was really a meaningful moment in time for me to sort of reconnect with the world via, another human being who was with me and hanging out with me. And so it's interesting that I'm just thinking about this now. It's interesting that I'm picking that episode now in regards to what just happened on yesterday when I put Eddie down. And so, but that, other than that, it was a really good episode. It's photography that I really like. And if you had joined our show after and you haven't gone through the back catalog, I think it was one that was really good, where the two of us had a really wonderful discussion of something that we both saw in person. So with that being said, I just want to say we'll pick up a regular schedule in March, and we'll have another show. We'll probably do the show that we were going to do in February, and I'll mention I'll mention that when we put that episode out. But this is not going to be an official episode. This will just be a rerun. So it's not going to be episode 226. This will just be a filler. And anyway, I really appreciate all of you who listen to our show and who give us incredible, great feedback and talk to us about how you like the show and how it sounds like two people talking over coffee, which is kind of how I want the show to be. But I really appreciate you guys spending the time with us and continuing to support us in all the ways possible. So anyway, with that being said, and one thing I noticed when I was playing this episode back, I mismentioned the date. I said October for 2020. So I'm going to give myself some grace because that first year after my wife died, it was pretty much of a zombie. So if I missed the date, but it was actually October 2022. So that being said, here's the episode with me and Ward talking about the Becher show at the Met Museum, and I hope you would enjoy it. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you. We'll see you in the middle of March. One just has to select the right objects and fit them into the picture precisely, and then they'll tell their own story all by themselves.
What is photography other than collecting?
Hey, welcome to the Street Shots Photography Podcast. This is Antonio.
And this is Ward.
And this is episode 170 for the end of October 2020.
End of October.
End of October already. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, so it's about Halloween time for those people who are running around dressed up as photographers pretending to be.
Well, that's what we did all week. So
what, we pretended to be photographers?
Yeah. And we sort of were photographers too. So
yeah.
It worked out.
Yeah.
You're very convincing.
So, yeah. And how you doing today?
I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
I think it's been a slice. It's been amazing.
Yeah. So
amazing
we're recording this early. We're just at the end of Ward's trip to New York. How's been the trip for you so far?
Really good. I think I got what I wanted. I came and did what I meant to do here, and I got to meet you, and we learned some important things about each other and how the city works for me. How the practical things like the train, all that
subways.
Came to enjoy quite a bit. So,
and your our last day here, we did a little walking in other photographers' shoes a little bit.
Yeah, we did.
I mean, not really, but we did a visit to the Jazz Loft.
The Jazz Loft is 821 6th
Avenue. Yeah, 821 6th Avenue. So anybody who doesn't know the Jazz Loft, there's a great documentary about it's like the documentary is called The Jazz Loft According to W. Eugene Smith.
Right.
And so the photographer, I won't go into too much details, but essentially he lived in a building where there was a lot of jazz musicians coming and jamming for endless hours into the night. And he had wired the whole place for sound. And so there's all these tape recordings and his photographs.
Yeah.
We did the visit to there. What was that like?
Oh, it was great. I mean, it's doing pilgrimages to faraway places, and for me, New York's a faraway place. So to, do the Empire State Building earlier in the week, which is a touristy thing, and then something that's a little deeper or more personal to us in terms of music and photography, and it's confluence of both, that building. So it was fun to be there. And imagine him poking his lens out the window and shooting down on 6th Avenue. That was like, we're taking pictures of I think the fire hydrant's over there. We'll get a picture of that. And shooting up at the windows where he lived. It was
kind of fun. When we got there was a vendor in front, and he goes, he said, you come to see the jazz place?
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Yes. Yeah. I said, other people have come here? He's like, yes, they come here a lot. And it's very nondescript building. It's still there, which is kind of cool. I mean, don't know how long they'll be there for, considering all the development that's going on in the city, but it's still there. 5-story, I wouldn't quite call it when I picture a loft, for me, the lofts are taller buildings and bigger spaces, but maybe loft in this case just represents any kind of commercial building, because it was a commercial building when he was living there, and the jazz musicians were playing there kind of illegally, because it wasn't a residential space, so they could play as loud as they want for late into the evenings. But Eugene Smith lived there. He set up a dark room and whatnot, and so. It's still a nondescript building. There's some kind of store downstairs. I don't know what it was, a trading place or something like that, like import export. Yeah. And it was closed, but we did sort of poke our heads into the hallway, which looked the same. I'm assuming looked the same, because there wasn't like new plaster on the walls.
No.
But that was kind of fun. And actually standing, even though we couldn't go up stairs, we could stand there and sort of peek out to the corners where you could see where he would shoot, because Gene Smith would photograph from his window a lot, and a lot of the shots from his window, I think they had like blackout paint on the windows so that there was no light coming in, but he had one window that was sort of shaped like a W, like it was scratched out, and so he would shoot using that as a foreground element and hide the foreground, and then the street would show up in the background. And in relation to that, last night we ended up watching
Minimata with Johnny
Depp, which is the story. To tell the story.
Well, it's a towards the end of Gene Smith's career, he had kind of an antagonistic relationship with Life magazine, which is pretty graphically depicted in the movie, and it was about his final project, which was to shoot the people who lived around the Minamata chemical plant and who were suffering
in Japan,
or suffering birth defects and so on. And it was very heart-wrenching, interesting, and in the end, enlightening portrait of him, of that part of his life.
And the highlight of that is that photograph of the mother bathing daughter.
Yeah, her daughter, yeah.
In black and white picture, and she's all deformed, and she's bathing.
The cover of Life, and
And we don't want to make this show about the review of the movie. Maybe we could do that later or something like that. Maybe we should review photographer movies.
I think we're going to do.
It's Gene Smith. We want to do Smith deep dive.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
But it was an incredibly good movie. And I was saying at the end, I thought this was a great way to do a biopic of a photographer, or, maybe of anybody, but of a photographer, because like someone like Gene Smith had such a huge career and it spanned so many years, and he did so many different things, World War II, Pittsburgh and all this other stuff. And how do you summarize that? You can't. And I think taking this one little story and expanding on it, and it doesn't cover his whole life, but Johnny Depp did a fantastic job. I mean, I didn't know.
Looked like him from the side.
It was an uncanny resemblance. And I didn't even see Johnny Depp anymore. Like sometimes you can kind of see him, like his character.
No,
I didn't really see him in this. I saw him playing this character. So anyway, if it's this is a highly recommended movie. Even if you don't know Gene Smith's photographs, I would see it, because it's kind of typical.
Well, there's a kind of a montage towards the beginning of the movie of his famous photographs.
Yeah.
So that's a good way. And I'm sure many of us would recognize some of the pictures that that go through that montage.
And at the beginning, they sort of compressed time a little bit, because they showed him photographing through his window, and some of the shots that he did during the Jazz Loft time, which was earlier than the Minamata, but I think they were just establishing character. And what they did in the set was they created the same window with that paint cut out, and I saw that, and I was like,
because you were pointing at the TV. I'm like,
look, I mean, to me, that kind of detail, for us photo geeks or something like that, but for me, that kind of detail is really important.
And the three windows in the loft, and that's you were outside those windows on the sidewalk,
right? They managed to do 3 windows rather than 2 or 4. Like someone paid attention to the details. Anyway, now we're getting into a review of that. But we did that yesterday. That was kind of nice. And then we marched over to see if we could see the 291 gallery from the Stieglitz time, but that building is not quite the same. We were sort of standing in the same area, but it didn't, we were more on the Gene Smith kick than the Stieglitz kick. So anyway, we did that. the beginning of the week, the first thing we did was go to the Metropolitan Museum to see the Bernd and Hilla Becher exhibit. And I mentioned that we would be talking about this, so I thought this was a good episode to actually, do our sort of review of it, and even just our experience walking through. Yeah. And this is, we're going to air this podcast at the end of October, and the exhibit is only until November 6th. Right. So if you're in the New York area and you're able to go to the Met Museum before November 6th, I would highly recommend going to see this show. I mean, you can see their work online and understand what you're looking at, so it may or may not appeal to you, but even if it doesn't, I would go see this because of the quality of the show and everything. So,
and the depth and breadth of it. I mean, this is the biggest retrospective I've ever heard of, and certainly seen in my experience. So, and you said was it Arnold Newman that you went to see?
No, it was Irving Penn.
Irving Penn. I always get those two guys mixed
Really?
up. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
But anyway, that was the only retrospective that you saw that was larger than this one,
or as large. As large.
Yeah.
I mean, it just by the nature of their work. I mean, for Irving Penn, there was a lot Yes, he's had a sort of varied career, and his
right.
You go from his still life. I mean, still life, and his portraits and stuff like that. And it was sort of a wandering through the years. And it was interesting about the show. Well, let's describe the show. Describe them a little bit. I think you're better at that.
They're a German couple, and they started photographing large industrial structures. In
their 50s, in the 1950s they started, or earlier.
I think it was later than that, actually.
Okay.
Well, they were interested in the subject matter, and I know Bernd was doing drawings of industrial subjects very early in his career.
And they're from Germany.
And they're
right?
German.
Yeah.
And then they started visiting steel plants and oil refineries, and first in Europe, and then moving on to the United States
and the UK
and Canada. I think there's one, the Windsor salt plant in Canada. And they're basically large, tall, monolithic, I guess is one adjective you could put on their subject matter, where they all the images are vertical in presentation. And
oh, that's right, they were all vertical. I didn't even realize that. Yeah.
And it was the way each of their subjects fill the frames very similar from one picture to the next. And the way I would be describing it sounds kind of boring, but when you look at the actual prints, even in the book, or we have postcards here to look at, that's one thing. But if you start looking and you see the amazing level of detail, the consistency of processing that they did from one end of the show to the other.
Well, let's go a little technical. As long as you're bringing that, let's talk the technical first, because I think this is important.
Yeah.
Photography is related to equipment. And in this case, they chose the right equipment based on the subject matter they were doing. And there was a bit of debate. We're trying to figure out what kind of cameras they were using, because there wasn't necessarily specified, but I guess they use different cameras across the spectrum, but most likely anything larger than a 4x5 view camera.
Yeah.
Maybe European standard 5x7,
right?
Which
6x9,
6x9 or something like that. But those are they actually had a couple of horizontal panoramics, but but maybe 8x10 view cameras as well. And the reason for that, well, that's what they had, and they sort of decided to ignore 35 millimeter or even medium format, and their subjects require this detail.
Right.
So they're using large format film and enlarging somewhat to create the print, shooting vertically, as you said.
Yeah.
They're going around with this giant camera, and they're going around. There's a little video of them unpacking into a hotel, and you see all the gear that they're bringing in, and it's all just heavy duty stuff. They also photographed these objects, these buildings and structures. They tend to do it on days that the sun was not there, on overcast days, because they wanted to avoid shadows as much as possible.
Shadows, and they get the detail in the nooks and crannies of each of their subjects. And some of them, like in the case of a blast furnace, which has a lot of pipes and ducts going around the outside of it, they certainly want the interior of those structures to be lit enough so that you could see all the detail in them. Right.
And their attention to detail also meant that they were often circling some of these objects, like photographing them from maybe 4 to 8 different angles, like the cardinal points on the compass, and maybe the individual points. So 8, it would be 8 points, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
North, south, east, west, northwest. Yeah. And some of their so describe their presentation, like how these were present. Oh, and the other thing I just wanted to mention before, I'm going to insert, I recorded this while we were walking through the galleries. So in this show, I'm going to insert little bits of us walking around so you can hear what the experience was like while we were looking at the video. I just don't know when I'm going to insert. So all of a sudden the audio changes and you hear us walking around. What's going on?
Gallery.
Yeah. I just want to do that for flavor. So. The print quality is really nice. When you see the documentary, you can see if we can figure out the size camera that they're using. I can't tell. It's not a 4x5.
The way you were talking about it, it seemed like it was a 5x7.
I mean, it could be 5x7. Is it? It's the same.
It's taller, right? It's not. It's not 2x3, and it's not 8x10, right? 5x7 is.
5x7 is more this proportion.
Yeah.
Wow, that's nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, describe how the presentation is.
So originally I thought it was curated this way, but actually the Bechers did set it up where they had groupings of images, sometimes as few as maybe 8 and as many as 30.
30 is their largest.
There's largest in a very, very symmetrical, square, rectangular presentation. Large prints, what would we say, 20 by 24? Or
at least, yeah. They went from that to a little bit larger to a little bit smaller, but they were certainly like much bigger than like 16 by 20 might have been the smallest one.
So some of these installations on the wall are kind of almost overwhelming in their scale, and to kind of soothe yourself a little bit, like what am I supposed to look at? You just walk up to one of them and have a look and see how much detail there is, and you start to find relationships between the images, but some images are grouped together by type of object, for instance, water towers or blast furnaces or
grain elevators,
gas storage tanks. And then some of them are broken up. There are a whole bunch of interesting images of objects that have different purposes. And so that kind of breaks up kind of the sameness.
Right. Yeah.
And each had their own charm. And you never felt, even with kind of the, and I keep coming back to this, the sameness of the proportions of the subjects that are being presented in the images, you never felt like enough already. There was so much detail in what they were doing and what they had, that it seemed fresh. Yeah. And it was fascinating.
One of the things that was when you this is my second time seeing the show. So
I saw it once. I actually want to talk with you about, did you pick up anything more different?
Okay, I'll think about that.
Time? All right, you do that in the background while you're talking.
Yeah, I think about that. Again, the marvel of this is partially the presentation. Mm-hmm. The Met had their full photography gallery, which is multiple different rooms set up for this show. And then they had a secondary gallery across from it, which was a very large space for some of the larger installations also for this. So it's almost an overwhelming number of prints.
Right.
When you look at the prints, what's amazing about everything is the consistency between picture to picture, or grouping to grouping, and the size of the objects that they place in there. It's like everything is it's kind of the same size,
right?
And regardless of the size of the object that they're photographing, so the sense of scale throughout the show kind of you're looking at a house and then you're looking at a grain elevator that's, 20 stories tall, and they're presented in the frame the same size.
Yeah.
But what was really great about this is that the print quality. Now we're talking that these are pre-digital. There's no digital photography in this. This is all film, and the print size and the subject matter absolutely invite you to quote unquote pixel peep.
Right.
And it's almost like so you get a presentation of 12 prints on the wall, and they're all, maybe let's say it's the same grain elevator or something like that. But each of the pictures seem to stand out on their own.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a grouping, they stand out on their own. But you can like drill your face into a picture, and you start to see things that, there's the macro and there's the micro in those images. And actually, to relate back to the question that you were asking me about my first and second experience, I think the second experience was more about sort of exploring that sense of scale and depth in the picture.
I know that you were interested in finding like the vehicles or something that would give a little twig as to what the scale was of the picture, right? And I found you doing that more than I did, or I was more interested in trying to figure out the year the picture was taken by, the age of the vehicles, which is, the car nerd.
Would you have done that if you were by yourself?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think if I was by myself, well, when I went to go see it for the first, it's similar to when you go see a movie twice.
Yeah.
The first time you see a movie, you're like the story is running and you're into the story, and like, and you don't have a chance to go back to it. You're watching it, and then you're done. When you see it the second time, you said, okay, I know the story.
Right.
Now I can start paying attention to other parts of it, the photography and this thing. I think maybe that's a little bit for me the same thing.
Okay.
Like I go there and see the overall, and I'm also sort of, I don't say I'm on a time limit, but I'm, I could probably have spent all day there. I wanted to see other things in the museum. So I tried to spend as much time with I could, but I couldn't dive into each picture and think about it in the same way that I was able to do the second time. To go back to the presentation, it was an amazing amount of prints. Mm-hmm. I mean, we didn't count them. But it must have been in the hundreds.
Yeah, absolutely.
All about the same size, all presented, white frames, most of them are white mats. There were some that were not matted, where the images were.
It was not a matte overlay. There was a floating mat.
A floating mat.
But the mat was out, a quarter of an inch away or less from the print itself. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, it was so you could see the entire. You could actually see.
You could see the edges,
paper edges. And then there were some presentations, not a lot of them, where they did what we would call diptychs. Were those the diptychs where they had the 1 and the 9?
Oh, I don't know. I always think of diptychs as being two complete pictures. I
thought they were described as. I thought they were described as diptychs, even two panels.
Diptychs, 2 panels. Yeah.
Describe those.
There would be one large print. I think it's usually one print that has one large image on it, usually on the left-hand side.
Yeah, on the left-hand side.
And on the right-hand side, there could be a grouping of 9, 16, 24, however many smaller images on another print, on another piece of paper. And when we were looking at them, we're like, well, how was this created? It wasn't a bunch of individual prints stuck together. It looks like they masked and printed on that large piece. So that would be some effort to mask 16 images, on one piece of paper.
Yeah. How would they do that?
Well, they would have to be careful.
And they were actually smaller prints. I realized that they're not enlarging, they're reducing.
They're reducing.
So if you're doing that from an 8x10 piece of film, how would you do that?
I don't know.
You'd have to use some kind of special lenses that would reduce down.
We'll have to look.
I didn't even think about that because.
Well, that's what I was wondering when we were walking around. Like, there was a lot of effort put into, first of all, registration of the prints on this one piece of photo paper. And then there's how do you get from the large format down to the smaller scale. So there's a catalog, that the Met is offering up, that you can buy that has all the images in the show, I believe, and some of the history. There's quite a bit of print in the book. There may be an explanation as to how that was done. And maybe I'm crossing my fingers. They will tell that.
There's actually a fair amount of text in there, which I like because I like that helps to do the deep dive. I didn't know about these people before the show.
Yeah.
Like it's not my, it wouldn't be a subject that I was necessarily interested in, so I didn't know about them ahead of time. But now I'm like,
I learned of them from my interest in Robert Adams and the new topographics photographers from the 70s. So I knew of them that they had their own flavor. They had their own German European flavor of doing these structures. So I knew a bit of their images, but I had no idea of the scale of what they actually worked on all these years.
Other than industrial objects, they did also photograph houses in Germany.
Yeah.
And specifically the framework houses. So to describe that here, actually, how would you describe that?
On the back side of the house, and actually I'll get into that a little bit later. We ran into a German woman who helped us out a little bit with the architectural detail. But on one side of the house, there's this almost stucco, and I don't know if it is stucco or whatever it is, but there's light colored boards painted in various patterns. They sort of look structural, but they're very clearly a design element. And
they're wood beams.
They're wood beams, and they're painted white.
No, the beams aren't painted white.
I thought the beams were painted white.
No, the beams are dark and the panels are white.
Okay. All right. I'm getting on.
Believe me. Here,
Believe me, he knows what he's
I'll show you a
remembering.
picture.
He's going to show me a picture.
There we go.
Oh, you're right. So, yeah, the open areas between the beams looks white, and then the beams themselves are dark. And they're different patterns. They could be house-shaped patterns, geometric. Some can be an organic, almost a tree shape.
Can you explain the reason why these are done this way? Did you read it?
I did not.
You did not. There was a certain, I'm not getting the details. It was like skimming them perfectly, but some amount of wood, they couldn't use an entire wall full of wood. They had to limit the amount of wood in the building. And so they filled it in with these white panels or whatever they were. I don't know
whatever material it is, if it was,
But they had to, like, this is just one side of the house.
Yeah.
The other side of the house was fine, but they had to have a limit to the amount of wood that they could use in a house. And so they ended up designing, at least in this area. I don't know exactly in Germany.
And what we discovered is there's not very often not any windows on that side where the design is. On the other side is typically a brick facade with windows on 2 stories, sometimes 3. Some of them have show 3 stories. And we were sitting in the gallery trying to postulate why these homes had bricks on one side, and the other side we were thinking, well, what's facing the street or whatever. And a woman who turned out to be German, some of these photographs were taken around her home, said the side where the weather's coming from is where the brick is. So it's to help protect the design elements on the.
It also maybe sounds like that the side with the framework is a lot more flimsy.
A lot more flimsy. Well, certainly compared to brick, it would be. So, and we thought that was fascinating. I certainly thanked her for explaining that to us. But
what's interesting for me is that in my neighborhood, there's a couple of houses in the area that's called Ditmas Park, where there's all these old houses from the turn of the 20th century, so 1899 to 1909. And there's a few houses, there's a lot of different designs there, but there are a few houses that riff on this framework design.
Right.
And I've always wondered about it. And like, why were these houses designed this way? And I'm sure here, it's not because of wood restrictions. It's just they're riffing off this style.
And I know too from, there's some resort towns in the mountains in British Columbia. One's called Kimberley. There's quite a large German population there. And there are homes that are built to very much have this kind of design element in them with the whiteboards and the dark beams. So it's fascinating architectural detail. Now we know where they come from.
Yeah. That's kind of why I love this kind of stuff, is to walk around, learn something new, and then say, oh wait, that's why that place is designed that way. Or at least it's that's where the sort of the history comes from. In the show, there's a little 7.5 minute documentary video.
Like, the son took it, and it was like I
don't think he took it. I think he edited it.
Okay.
And I think he had it scanned. First of all, it's from 16 millimeter, and it looks fabulous.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to just comment on it because, you know, sometimes when you see old films and it's scratchy and it's, you know, it's fine, but to see the quality of this, like they restored those. And anyway, it's a little scene of them going out to photograph. I think that was
It was in Ohio, wasn't it?
It was in the States, yeah. And I think that's, I would say it's a grain elevator.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a grain elevator.
And
In the Canadian prairies, we'd call that an inland terminal.
inland terminal.
It's where your truck drops off your grain, and then the railway goes by it, and then the silos get drained into the railway cars. Sorry.
But no,
I'm just filling it in.
But it doesn't sound anything related to farming. It's like inland terminal sounds like where a train stops, you know.
It is. Well, the train does stop there.
I know, but well, okay. But what does it do there?
Yeah, exactly.
And a terminal sounds like it's the end, but it's the end for the return. Anyway,
It's the end for the farmer.
End for the farmer, the beginning for the
after that. Yeah, exactly.
So this little video shows them, like I said before, they're unloading their gear. Actually, that's where we came into the thing. It's unloading their gear from this Volkswagen bus, which was kind of cool to see.
Yeah.
And they had us guessing what kind of cameras they had, but they go out to the location and they're both carrying this giant camera, pieces of the camera, you know, the tripod and the thing, and they're setting it up. And
they're very coordinated.
they were, yeah.
He's carrying this, and Hill is carrying the camera, the frame of the camera with the lens board on it, no lenses.
Yeah.
And they're strutting out into there.
Actually, I want to comment on that before we go into this story and realize that they're one of the they seem to be one of the few photographer couples. They both were into this thing. And I thought that was really cool because they're both doing what they love, you know, and to have that kind of pairing in a relationship, I think it's kind of rare that two people like to do the same thing exactly and go out and do these projects and to do it for so long. They did it for up until the 2000s, until
Bernd got ill.
Yeah. Anyway, they go and they're scoping out this grain elevator and finding a viewpoint to set up at least for one angle. I'm assuming, and in the process, there's a tree, or maybe not a tree, but like a very thick. I mean, it looks close to a tree, but it's a thick bush or something. It's not like a tree with a stump. And they actually did have a stump. And Bernd is like pulled out this saw, and he starts to saw the thing down. And he's like, you know, they're spending all this time filming him, sawing it, and Hilla's like dragging the branches off.
Yeah, that's fine.
And they're like pulling this thing so it's not in the shot, and they get it down to a stump, and they leave the stump there. I guess
Actually, they left quite a bit of trunk.
Quite a bit of the trunk,
like 8 feet or 7 feet into the air.
But I guess it was inconsequential to the whole picture. And you know, it just had me thinking about this, and I might have been obsessing a little bit about this idea of altering the landscape to fit the picture. But you know, they actually the farmer was there, helped them out.
Yeah, he had permission.
And they dragged it away, and they made the photo.
Yeah.
But it was a great little film to see them.
Cool. Yeah, it was great.
It's part of the exhibit, and I would say, you know, it's worth seeing. It'd be nice to see a longer version of them. I'm imagining there's more footage of them. So it's nice to see that background stuff. I like seeing behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes at one particular location, so you could see their process and where they set up.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to sort of talk about, and I mean, in relationship to this show in general, but we can go into finer details, is the idea of these prints, the print quality. Yeah. And both had a bit of, actually, I think more when you were here, because I'm thinking about it in relationship to photography altogether, but like to see prints like that, to see actual, you know, silver gelatin prints that are done so well. They're consistent for their style.
Over 30 years.
Over 30 years. Amazing. Right. And you know, I'm assuming that sometimes they had to shoot over multiple days. Their whatever they were shooting, I would think, given the coverage that they did, and then getting all that, like the exposure correct. If you guys haven't, to listeners, if you guys haven't worked in a dark room, before. It's not obviously like working in Photoshop where everything is, you can be very consistent, to do this with large format film, with giant prints, with chemicals, giant trays. I mean, I'm thinking of all the steps that it takes to make a print, just to make one print, and to make 30 of them. And I'm sure they made tons of prints just to get to these levels. They must have gone through tons of paper. Yeah. The cost of this must have been insane, but the consistency of it. Anyway, like I said before, we pixel peeped and you go up to the prints, and especially because they were doing very bright skies and stuff like that. And the skies were not washed out. No. The skies had some
little bit of tone
detail in it. Yeah. More than the color of the paper.
Right.
And it got me thinking also about if I was going to do prints like that now, I'd have to use an inkjet printer most likely.
Yeah, and you would see dots.
You would see dots. Maybe not all the time. Maybe it depends on the kind of paper you're using, and it depends on how the printer would. But like if you took I don't know, would you see dots on all of them?
Depends. I would on my printer at home.
Yeah,
for sure.
I was just thinking about that sort of loss, like not loss. I mean, we have to sort of make a simulation of silver gelatin prints now, and what that would take. Anyway, it was something that maybe on my second trip there was starting to think about, like, and thinking about altering the environment, which is the little video was showing.
They're from their time. I mean, that's the tree's in the way. You get rid of the tree.
Yeah, and it looked like the farmer didn't give a crap about it.
Yeah,
exactly. But also the size of the prints too, just like that physical size of it, the quality of it, the amount of detail in it. I don't know if modern, I mean, unless it was like a phase 1 camera, like 100 or maybe plus megapixel camera could pull in that much detail. I don't know.
I have no clue. I mean, I wasn't, I wasn't trying to compare it with digital when I was looking at the images. I was just, what is it? Can I see? It's as close to being there. I mean, you get kind of the same sense with Ansel Adams' picture too, right? In terms of the detail. Right. You see the needles on the pine trees and so on.
Well, did we mention they were all black and white pictures?
I don't think we did. But
so now's a good time.
They're all black and white.
They chose to make everything black and white. Yeah.
And so with the level of detail that you could just bathe in it almost, it was like, and that's just one print. And on this wall there are 15 other prints, and with just as much detail. So there's everything. And like you had said before, you could take it all in as a grouping, or you could go in and drill down and look at any one of them and look for relationships between the two of them. And, we didn't spend a lot of time looking at individual installations to see if we could. There were a few times where we caught the relationship between one print and another, or the grouping, on a more macro scale. But it was, it was something else.
And what would I want to say your takeaway? I don't want to end this quite yet, but what would be one of the takeaways for you having seen this?
First of all, and I think you had mentioned it before, even if the subject matter doesn't really interest you, something will happen when you go look at an exhibit like this, because you realize the effort that's required. You realize that not just the effort, but like you said, the consistency. You don't have to buy the program or the catalog, but it's something that you should see in terms of not just appreciation of photography, but also, and in my case, because it interests me, the history of photography. That I'm sure nobody else, certainly that I know of or heard of, took on a project of this type so exhaustively. And what they were trying to do was capture images of these structures before they were taken away by changes in industrial technology. And they were trying to preserve that. And that's what they were, I think that was the original impetus for it. But it does two things. It does show these structures that the vast majority of them don't exist anymore, and also provide an artistic experience or a creative experience as a viewer to absorb.
I think Hilla was the one who came up with the word typology for this. I mean, just in a sense, almost like recording
recording,
because that's what these
posterity for, or whatever, to honor the object itself.
Right. I think that's what they were doing, and they're sort of obsessed by recording these objects.
Right.
And then also by the fact that they would sort of circle them. They're three-dimensional objects, these giant buildings, and they would hit all the cardinal points of it. So they want you to see the same thing from different points of view.
Right. So, and it's interesting. You do find yourself going back and forth between prints going, okay, this is here, that's there. And we're looking at, chains and lines and stuff hanging from, they were hanging from the structure.
Oh, right. We're trying to piece
well, one thing is to say, okay, well, it's here now. We're looking in this view. It should be here. And also in the case of things like guy wires, that you can see it.
The wires.
Images from power transmission towers where you can see that power line run off into the distance, and it's still picked up by the lens in the film.
It's almost like smaller, on the print, it's smaller than a hair.
Yeah.
And you follow it all the way down, that amount of detail.
Stunning.
But this typology reminds me of, the first thing that clicked in my mind was when I worked at the Botanic Garden for doing their calendars. I got a chance to dive into some of their archives for some pictures. And as botanical photographers will do, is they're recording the specimens. And so they're dropping them down on something, and they don't necessarily have to do a three-dimensional, like a 3D view of it, circle around it, but they're cataloging it, and they're cataloging this species and this species, and the pictures themselves, they're photographing them mainly as a recording device, but then actually start to look at them as pictures.
Right.
And, whether the photographer knew this or not, or was trying to make the plant look nice, or just photograph it in a way, they would, end up sort of inadvertently creating art. And so we have a visitor here. Sorry, buddy. Sorry, we're in my living room, so we have we have a cat who's going to talk to us. Hi there, buddy. If I pet him, he won't talk anymore. So this ends up being, not as being this typology, this recording of these objects that you said we're probably never going to see again because they're going to be destroyed. But they also become a catalog. They just become this, in some sense, a record. I think there would be some sort of value at doing a typology today of anything.
Sure.
Is it just like with any kind of subject that you would want to do?
Pick a subject that has that sort of a consistency. I mean, we could do, it's big right now, people on the Canadian prairies anyway, taking pictures of wooden grain elevators that are on their way out. I mean, that's big. A lot of people are doing it. There's that.
What about something more
urban?
or for scale? Like, what could, what would be the purpose of it, but what could you do, like, if I wanted to explore something like this on my own, what would be, like, you see where I live?
Yeah.
Would it be a still life of something? Would it be objects? Be like doing botanic? Because they talk about this being like recording botanical specimens.
Yeah. Well, you've got those bonsai tree pictures on your wall in your house, right?
Yeah. I mean,
those sorts of things. What would interest me, being new to your neighborhood, would be a lot of those buildings, either storefronts as part of a bigger building. I could see taking pictures of each storefront and then the greater building, and when you're doing the parent and the children, the big print and the collection of little prints, something like that.
And what do you think the value of a typology is in photography?
This is a different way to experience a subject, to make you look at the subject instead of walking by it every day, or making something that's mundane or whatever more interesting. You can, it's like anything else. You take a picture of a person. Well, it goes back to what Gino was saying. Gino was saying in the podcast you had with him about, he took a picture of that biker guy, and you could stare into his eyes for as long as you wanted. You can do that as a viewer, and here it's kind of the same thing. You can look into that storefront and see the details behind the glass and contemplate that on its own, plus it being part of a greater whole, and you've got a different scale. And I think you're talking a lot today about scale. You wanted, to see the human, or to see the cow, or the railway car, and how it relates to the actual size of the building.
The thing about the book, I wouldn't necessarily rely on the book as a way to see the show.
No.
And unfortunately, I don't know if this show is traveling. It's a heck of an exhibit. I think it took them several years to put this together.
Yeah.
And they're borrowing a lot of the images from different galleries. And I think they worked with the one of the museums in San Francisco to put this together, and as well as the archives from the Becher's archives. So I imagine it's a giant thing, and it'd be a shame if this doesn't travel. I mean, it seems like it would be a great show to travel. So I don't know if anybody who's listening to the show will be able to see this. And if you could only get the book, you know, it's a worthwhile investment. I think it's a beautifully produced book. The issue is that you can't get close up to the prints. You can't see this stuff close up. So.
Well, there's an image on the front of a water tower, and the amount of detail that they were able to do in the printing process is gives you an idea of what the print might be, although the print does still exceed it by quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, they're much larger and stuff. Yeah. So what would be my takeaway from it? And this is a very good question, because, again, this is not my style of work. It's not what I would have sought out in general, but now that I've seen it, it's funny because this is new to me, and I think I posted it up in our unusual group a while back when the show was first announced, and I said, like, this looks interesting, but I wasn't quite diving into it. I didn't know who they were, but now having seen this stuff, I thought, you know, I could really spend all day in these galleries just looking at these images. I could go back and over again. I think there's just so much to see and so much to contemplate, but it gives me this idea of, like, would I want to do something like this, but my version of it? Would it be something that was of a value and time? And I kind of do that when I walk around my neighborhood. Right. And I tie that in with, you know, walking in Walker Evans' shoes. You know, like in fact, I think he's referenced as part of their influence for some of for their work, because he's going around maybe not at the same amount of detail or wandering around and shooting the same thing. He's always looking for a sort of a single aspect of the object that he's photographing, a building or a house or something like that, to sort of tell the whole story. Right. And of course, Evans never shied away from sun. In fact, I think he always wanted sun in his picture. He called it raking light. Raking light.
Well, along the facade of a building.
Right. To create an angle and stuff like that. Yeah. But, you know, I've done that in my neighborhood with certain houses. I don't know if, you know, or structures. I don't know if they're going to be here or not, but I kind of think, like, if my pictures tend to last a long time, then I'll have some record of some of these structures that will be in here. So I kind of already do this, not at the extent these people are, but this, like, I look at these people and I was like, they're dedicated. They were dedicated to what they were doing, and that's all they did. Yeah. You know, they didn't go and photograph, you know, landscapes. They have a few landscapey pictures in there that show the sort of the overall and stuff, but this is what they did. And there's a part of me that envies that, to have that kind of dedication to do one thing for your entire life. Yeah. And I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. So,
well, we're benefiting from it now as viewers. I mean, look at it that way, and watching them work together, and they didn't talk very much to each other. There was, like, the task at hand was just, it was a coordination. Yeah. And I think that was that spoke to. You know, it was just built in. What is it we have to do to get this image of this particular structure? And they just worked and created. And we did see some ephemera of Polaroid images.
Oh, right. That was the other thing. Let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about that for a second. Yeah.
So in one of the galleries, there was Polaroid pictures, which I assume were test prints or prints made for dummies, which is like a proto book, as they were, you know, putting together either for a gallery show or for books. And they actually did produce quite a few books. I know Aperture.
Yeah, Aperture did a bunch of them. Yeah,
did some of the later ones, and then one's printed.
Actually, there's one on the framework houses. I think they did one. Okay, just to remember that they did that. Yeah. But yeah, go on.
And so they. Let's see, where I lost my train of thought there.
About the books,
so
the ephemera.
Yeah. So So you saw notes, you saw their notes about where it was, and some of it was interesting too, because when they're still shooting in Germany, some notes would say DDR on it. So pictures that were
what's
taken
DDR?
is the Deutsche Democratic Republic, which is the East Germany.
So
some of the images-
pre-Berlin Wall.
Pre-Berlin Wall, yeah. So
So it sounds like they got to go. I realized that they got to go cross border.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So when you look at the name of the German town and then you check the year, you could probably figure out that it was taken on the East German side. So no, it was just interesting to see that they put a lot of effort into, or just see what effort they put into arranging the images to put in whatever form they were going, whatever final form they were going to go into.
Yeah.
And so it's fun to see that.
That's a behind the scenes kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's and it also shows that they weren't just dropping themselves into a location and saying, okay, we're going to photograph this. There was a lot of prep work.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming because some of the places they were photographing were active sites, they had to work with the people who owned it so that they get permission and shot there and with the blessing. Like they weren't actually, the one thing about these pictures that they're not judgmental.
No.
Like there's some really nasty looking industrial places. Like we look at them now and you say like, I wouldn't want, there's some pictures with the houses
Right.
like 2 feet away, like right across the street from these steel factories. And there's no judgment in the pictures.
This is just the way it is.
Yeah. Which I find interesting because, we can often skew our photographs with judgment because we project our own ideas into the image when we photograph it or how we decide to publish it. And there's none of that in this.
I
just
think
realized.
of Robert Adams, where he's outraged by the encroachment of urban sprawl into nature.
Right.
And that was his deal. The Bechers were into just documenting what was there with the point of view of, well, this thing that we're photographing will not be here much longer.
And then,
It's a different point of view.
but it's so interesting how that documentation then turns into art. I mean, this stuff is being presented in an art museum, and even one of their exhibits is someplace, I can't remember where it was, but they actually won an award for sculpture because of the way the gallery was set up. So they got the sculpture award. Like the whole thing, the whole presentation was something, but to take this documentation and like I was talking about the botanic pictures, like the photographer, I think, I don't know, can't get into the mind of a photographer from whenever, whether or not they were thinking about art. I would say probably not, closer to the beginning of photography or at that time, I would think, well, we got a camera and, we need to take documents of these specimens. Right. It's not the time to go, they're going to try to make it nice. Yes. But they're not going to spend like, I'm going to do light. Right. I don't know. I haven't read enough in the book of whether they were, they were thinking about they're producing art. Oh, they were doing both.
Well,
were they aware of this?
Burn's early drawings, of industrial subjects. I think he wanted to create art out of these, and I'm sure. I'm guessing that, not having read the catalog yet, that he probably photographed some of these. He probably photographed some of these buildings or these structures, so that he could do his drawings. From art school, and then I probably just kind of caught fire from there.
There was one at the beginning of this exhibition, or not at the beginning, one of the rooms that showed a thing that he did, a collage of the steel aluminum pipes.
Well, just big ducts, blast furnace ducts.
Yeah, and what he did was he cut out the prints and then sort of put them together in sort of a collage that made it look like it was one structure.
Yeah,
which I thought was really kind of fun. I was like, if I was going to do something like that, that'd be kind of, that's something you could do in Photoshop now. And you come out with the same kind of effect. But I thought that was really, really cool to like take bits and pieces from this photograph, cut them out, and join them together and create something new. Yeah. And that was kind of fun to see, and to see the progression of, like, I think he was the artist drawer and she was the cataloger, and so they seemed to make a perfect pair. Yeah. So. Well, I think we about covered it. I think this was, there's probably much more we can talk about this, but
I think it was a great show. If, like we say, if you have a chance to go see it at the Metropolitan, please do.
There's certain, I will link in the show notes. There's a couple of actually walkthroughs of the gallery that the Met put up on YouTube. And there's another discussion, which I haven't watched yet, but a discussion with the person who curated the show. And those are actually helpful to see as well. I think that you can just get some background into it. And there's a little art speak in it, which I'm not a big
And it's
fan.
a bit of a primer before you do go to the gallery. I would actually recommend seeing them. I'm glad I saw them before I went into the show.
Yeah. But keep your eyes open if you can see this show. If it does travel somewhere, or if you can see any documentaries about this, I think it's a nice eye opener. Like I said, for me, I didn't know about them before, and I enjoy discovering even older photographers. Like I think you've got a better body of knowledge of older photographers, even though I'm a photographer and I've taken classes. I don't
really worked. I didn't really work.
Well, I spent my time working, and you spent your time getting books and studying this stuff. And so for me, it was a great pleasure to discover these people and just find like, oh, this is another aspect of photography that I didn't know about and I like. And it'd be kind of nice. I don't know if it's possible to walk in their shoes, but to do it my own way, you know, to go around, we talked about in the gallery, like some ways that we can, or I figured in some way I can mimic that, and I might try that project when I can. So we'll see. So anyway, I think we've done it. I think
sounds good.
We did a show. We did a show, and we did it in person. Yeah. And we might have a little bit of construction going on in the background, but I think that's appropriate with the
subject
with
matter.
the subject matter. Yeah. So.
And like Becher's buildings, I won't be here much longer. I'll be leaving New York here later this afternoon. So.
Yeah. So. Well, then the next show we'll do from a distance.
We'll do from a distance.
It won't be spooky action from a distance.
That's right.
Familiar action.
Well, the spooky, that's the whole Halloween thing. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. So anyway, why don't you let everybody know where they can find all your wonderful work and stuff?
Certainly. I'm posting new content up to Vero. I'm at W Rosin Photo. And I'm also on Facebook at Ward Rosin Photography, WARDROSIN Photography. And I'm also on my website where I sell my fine prints is rosin.ca, ROSIN.ca. That's all I can think of. And I'm also on Twitter at W Rosin Photo. And our unofficial sponsor is Ornis Photo, ORNIS.photo. Where I sell X-mount and Sony E-mount 7 Artisans lenses and lens adapters. Yeah. It's a fun little thing to do. Yeah. Make a little bit of money doing that.
I love third-party lenses. Yeah. Sorry for you Canon people.
Yeah, I don't know.
We won't get into that. So anyway, I'm on Vero now at AM Rosario and Twitter at AM Rosario. You can look at my pictures on Instagram. Just don't join me because the hacker is lurking. But you can look at my pictures there at AM Rosario, and Facebook at rosario.photo, and my website is amrosario.com. And our website for this is streetshots.photography. So I need to revamp it a little bit, but yeah. So thanks it was great having you here. Great trip.
Yeah, it was outstanding. I will never forget it.
All right, well, fantastic. And we'll be together in a couple of weeks to do our next show, whatever it might be.
It'll be mid-November.
Mid-November. All right. Well, thanks, Ward.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And thanks, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. And take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. That's it.
That's a lot.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. I might have Becher nightmares now. I don't know. All right. Where are we going to next? Can we go to the Egyptian thing? I want to walk where Meg Ryan walked.
Okay.